I'm just going to go ahead and start making the medical medium liver rescue broth, one of our favorite recipes. I try to make this weekly because I use it in so many different dishes that call for either broths, water, cooking. Rather than using olive oil or something to saute, I will saute in the liver rescue broth. It's just a really delicious, nutritious way to take in really beautiful ingredients, and I'll talk to you about them in just one moment. But this is really hydrating for your liver. It's so delicious. There's no salt in here, so basically you can drink it too. And the beautiful thing about this broth is that you can actually eat the whole thing as a soup with all the veggies in it. I like to strain the veggies off and save them for later. Either keep them in the refrigerator, you can even freeze them and then use the veggies that are in the broth and create another soup. When I'm ready for something super soothing, I take all of the ingredients from the broth after I'd strained off the liquid, and I blend it in my Vitamix with some filtered water. And at that point, I might add a little sea salt or some cumin or something like that. Blend it, and then I have another really nourishing soup on hand that's just really delicious. So I'm going to talk about these ingredients and just get going. First of all, I'm using a bunch of celery. So I've got my celery here that I'm going to chop up. I'm using about 6 carrots. It depends on the size. So I always go a little bit, it's not exact, I always go a little bit heavy in some areas because I like to maximize on these ingredients. I'm using 2 yellow onions. I'm using an inch of ginger, fresh ginger, an inch of fresh turmeric, and a cup plus of peeled burdock root. You can find these in the natural food stores, Whole Foods, or the Asian markets if you can't find it there. A winter squash. I have a delicata, a cup of cilantro. I'm going to use all of the cilantro, including the stems, and about 6 cloves of garlic whole. So I'm going to go ahead and start just peeling my carrots. And I'm just going to chop them. It's not like an exact perfect chop that I'm going to do because really I'm just looking for the broth, the liquid in here. So I'm going to go ahead and peel first, then chop. I already cut the ends off of my carrots. And the recipe, like I said, it calls for 6 carrots. I have about 9 here because they're different in size. But, a little bit extra is not going to hurt. And this is just one of my favorite, recipes because it's just so good. It's such a beautiful way to get in really amazing ingredients. The turmeric, the ginger, the garlic, just anti-inflammatory, really good for our bodies. And the burdock root, which is something I had not had before having this liver rescue broth. So I don't know if you've tried it yet. We have a YouTube video on this broth available on our channel. If you subscribe to our channel or not, you can watch it and find the recipe there and watch the process there as well. There's another healing broth on there too that's the medical medium. That one's a little different. It has mushroom in it, and I like that one a lot too, but this one is really my go-to. And it doesn't take much time. You're just going to prep the veggies and put them on your stovetop with some filtered water. Let it cook for about 1.5 hours or more. I'll probably do about 2 hours, letting it cook first to boil and then letting it kind of simmer for a couple hours. Let all the flavors come together. And then strain your broth off. Keep the broth stored in your refrigerator. And you can enjoy it over the course of the next week. You can always freeze the broth too and pull it out and use it. And like I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite ways to use the broth, aside from how you typically use broth, which is in soups and things like that, is I like to saute my ingredients with the broth in lieu of added fat, whatever my oil is that I would normally saute in. And that's a process that I really started becoming aware of in the last 2 years and trying to cut back on my fat intake and less oil and just using liver rescue broth to saute. Such a cool way to, improve your health and to cut down on fat and even good fat. There is good fat and there's bad fat, or healthy fat and unhealthy fat, but the liver does not discern between fat. So fat is fat, and when you're focused on your healing, it's good to cut down on your fat when you're cooking. So I'm just gonna go ahead and chop up my carrots into little diced pieces and stick them in my pot. I've got my pot here ready, and I could have done this ahead of time, but then all I would have been showing you was basically just throwing some prepped veggies into a pot and putting some water on. So I wanted to really show you the ingredients, and the main thing that takes a lot of time is just chopping and peeling, but otherwise, you know, it's gonna do its own thing once it gets on the stovetop, and you can just walk away from it and stir it periodically, keeping it at a low simmer, and you know, then it'll be ready in just a couple of hours and you can have it on hand. And I talked about earlier keeping the veggies from the broth and either making a separate soup out of them or freezing them and turning it into a soup later, because the ingredients are just really beautiful. So, or you can just eat the whole thing as a soup, you know, without straining off the broth. So you're just chopping the carrots up into small pieces because it's just going into the pot and it's going to cook down. So they're not going to be perfect. I just want little small chunks so that when I do use this broth later for a soup, I can just go ahead and stick it into my Vitamix and have it ready to, enjoy, you know, less work for my machine to process big chunky things. So, but it's super delicious, and there's no salt in here, so you can drink it, and it's just really soothing. It's, the medical medium says it's like liquid gold basically, and it really is. Just if you need a pick-me-up in the afternoon and you want something like a tea, a warm tea that's not caffeinated, this is a great substitute for that. Super nourishing, really delicious. The flavors just really come together really well. And there's just something about it that I would say it's one of my favorite medical medium recipes. So it's in the Liver Rescue book. And like I mentioned earlier, this is on our YouTube channel. So you can find the recipe there. Or if you don't have the Liver Rescue book, highly recommend getting it for your library, because there's so many delicious recipes in there, ways to really upgrade your health with really healing foods, definitely eating the rainbow, and taking in straight up nourishment. No troublemakers. You know, the troublemaker foods are the things that keep us sick or get us sick, contribute to illness, symptoms, things like that. The healing, hydrating foods are the ones that can help to reverse stuff that ails us, basically. So we're really high on all things medical medium in terms of eating for beauty, eating for vitality, eating for health, and taking charge of our health by eating plant-based foods that are basically grown from the earth. So, and this is a way to, the broth is a way to start cooking differently, and, you know, adding it into soups. A lot of soups are just high in salt, and even with the broths that you get in the grocery stores, high in sodium, and you don't really know what kind of salt they're using. And I like to think that if it doesn't say sea salt, it's probably some kind of salt that's just not going to be good for you. And most of them just say sodium. So something to pay attention to when you're looking at ingredients. And there's so many hidden salts and fats and things like that in ingredients that are in the grocery store, in the products. So it's really our responsibility to take charge and pay attention to the foods that we're taking in, what the ingredients are. And the way to read ingredients on packaging or something like that is to basically, whatever the first ingredient is on a label, that means that that ingredient is what's in the product the most. So if the first ingredient is sugar, that means that the product is really high in sugar. Typically, you know, if salt or sodium is up there, then it's high in salt. So as you read through ingredients, the last ingredient means on the label means that's going to be the least amount of what's in your product that you're buying, if that makes sense. So, and even the health food stores, I mean, you just have to really watch out for these sneaky little pesky things that they might not seem like a lot, honestly, in the time, but little by little, as we take in more and more of these troublemaker foods, it's what's keeping us sick, unhealthy, sluggish, tired, etc., whatever kind of ailments we might be having. It really, so much of it is about the food that we're eating. So you can, like I said, find this recipe in the Liver Rescue book by the Medical Medium. I'm not sure if it's in the Cleanse to Heal book. I think it might be as well, but those two books are incredible to have in your arsenal, and just, you can find so many beautiful recipes in there. We share quite a lot of them on our channel. Highly recommend trying them out. You can enjoy sweets, savories, bread, cakes, desserts, all the things, and eating in this way that's really promoting health instead of eating processed foods, baked goods that are loaded in sugars, like refined sugars and things like that. They're just not good for you. So this is burdock root, and it's really interesting, really good for your liver. These are thinner versions of burdock root. Like I said earlier, if you can't find them in your grocery store in the produce section, go to an Asian market and they'll have them there. And this is just a really, you can see the difference once I'm peeling it. I've never eaten it just straight up burdock, but it really brings the flavor to the recipe in a very subtle way. I don't even know if I can't really necessarily taste it, but the combination of all of them together is just so good. So I'm just peeling the burdock root. I peeled the carrot. I'm chopping it up. I tend to go a little bit heavier on some of the veggies just because why not? You know, I go a little bit heavier on the turmeric. I go a little bit heavier on the ginger. I go a little bit heavier on the garlic. I'm going a little bit heavier with everything, basically. The cilantro, oops, didn't mean to put that in there into my pot. But I've got my pot over here that I'm just adding everything to. And then in terms of the squash that goes into the broth, you can use any kind of winter squash. I use butternut sometimes. I couldn't find butternut this time, so I'm using a delicata squash. And we're in that soup season. It's October now, so it's a perfect time to start making your own broth at home and enjoying some really healing soups using this broth and just giving it a try. It's just a worthy use of time for sure. If you can't find burdock root, I mean, like I said, go to the Asian market. I've made this broth before without it, but I just hate to leave any of these beautiful ingredients out of the soup when I'm making it. So it ends up having just a really delicious flavor. Since these burdock root pieces are kind of thin, I'm just going to go ahead and chop them into little rounds. Do you want me to do a flip? I don't know what that means. Oh, you want to, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm just chopping up the burdock root. Oops, excuse me. Gonna put it into my pot. Sometimes I'd make a double batch of this, and so that way I have extra just if I'm gonna prep. I always find that it's easier just to prep a bunch at once and have extra on hand, but I'm gonna be playing around with some soups this week, so I'll be using this broth in quite a few things. And like I've mentioned a few times, one of my favorite ways to use the broth too is to saute vegetables in it. Because, for example, when recipes call for water, like a savory recipe, the the broth in lieu of water just adds more depth to the equation, and it just makes it that much more tasty. And because there's no salt in here, you can add your salt, well, we use sea salt, but you can add it into the actual recipe that you're using with the broth. But I'm just chopping up my celery. Calls for a bunch of celery, so it's kind of subjective. Bunches are always varying in size, but putting it all into my pot. And then I'm going to chop the rest of the celery here. I don't know if anybody's made this before, but give it a try. Find the recipe and the video on our channel under Liver Rescue Broth. And on our channel too, there's quite a few recipes that we're sharing that use the Liver Rescue Broth in it. For example, there is a chickpea noodle soup that's a medical medium soup on our channel. It's so good. It's a fat-free healing soup. There's a zucchini lasagna soup that uses the broth that's really delicious. There's an asparagus soup that uses the broth that's super good. And I'm trying to think what else. There's a mushroom and millet herb risotto that uses the broth that's on our channel too. These are all medical medium recipes. Just like to share with you our favorites and encourage you to give them a try because they really promote healing. So here's my cilantro. I'm going to use all of this. I'm just going to chop it up, stems included, and put the whole thing into my pot. Now, this is a great detoxifier. Cilantro helps to remove heavy metals from your system. So I hope you like cilantro. I know some people think it tastes like soap, but you can sneak it in there. It's really does wonders for your body. I'm just putting it in there. I love cilantro, so whenever I can go heavy on cilantro, I do. I love the taste of it. I love the texture. Back in the day, when I was a lot younger, I always thought when you added things like cilantro or different flavors, you always just used seasonings that were in a jar. But anytime I can get fresh herbs in there, I do. So here's my delicata. Just gonna chop the ends off. There's gonna be seeds in here, so I'm gonna take all of that out. I need to sharpen my knife, I think. So what I'm gonna do, a trick for me to cut this is I like to cut it into pieces and then basically just cut the sides off rather than trying to peel it because the squash can be pretty firm. And I love butternut squash in this soup too. They just did not have any at the store when I went to get it, so I'm using the delicata. But honestly, this one is really delicious too. And it is the season for these kinds of things. So there's all the seeds in here. What I'm gonna do basically is just cut the edges so that the seeds just stay in the center, and it makes it easier for me to move around the squash. So I'm going to take all the seeds, put them into my compost, and then just chop it up. Just chop it into pieces, stick it into your pan, and like I said, I'll be putting some filtered water in here and then letting it boil, and then it'll cook for, I let it simmer at a low temp for about 2 hours. Then I just remove it from heat, let it cool down, and strain off the broth with a fine mesh strainer. And I save the innards for a soup later. And that way, I'm not wasting any of these beautiful ingredients, and I'm maximizing on making different dishes. So I'll take the leftover veggies from the broth and I'll put them into a Vitamix with some filtered water. At that point, I'll add a little bit of sea salt, or like I mentioned earlier, maybe some cumin or something like that, or even some jalapeno, and then blend it into a really smooth, soothing soup that honestly goes really well. We have on our channel. It's a medical medium. It's a organic gluten-free sandwich bread recipe. So find that video, make that bread. It's yeast-free, it's fat-free. It has fresh apple in it. And you don't really taste the apple, but it's just a delicious, healing sandwich bread that I love. And that sandwich bread goes really well with the soup here that I'll make with the leftover veggies. So yeah, it's just a way to kind of plan out your week. When you have something like this in your refrigerator, then you know, okay, I can make a series of different soups, play around, find things that work. There's on our channel too, there is a roasted red pepper soup that's a medical medium one that's really delicious as well. And making that bread with it because it's so healing. There's oat flour in it, and I'm trying to think, I haven't made it in a minute. But yeah, the apple, instead of using yeast, using ground flax and water to basically create like an egg, and it rises too, which is really cool. So the next bread I'm working on is a sorghum bread, which should be interesting because I've not yet played around with that. But my knife is a little bit dull. Adding in the squash. And then I have left some garlic, some turmeric, some ginger, and some yellow onion that goes in here. And then it calls for 12 cups of filtered water. I use, honestly, like 16 cups of filtered water. And the reason I do that is because I'm going a little bit heavier on some of the veggies, and I want more of the broth. So I'm kind of making it slightly bigger than the original recipe. So I have more because, like I said, if I'm taking the time to do it, I want to make sure that I have plenty. And sometimes a recipe might call for like 6 cups of broth, you know, so I don't want to use all of it on one recipe. I want to have enough for different things that I'm making. So for example, we got some pumpkins, the little baby pumpkins at the store, and have been making different kinds of soups and creams, vegan with pumpkin. And in that instance, I'm saving the seeds and I'm roasting them and enjoying them as a snack because they're really delicious. So good. I've not tried roasting the squash seeds, although I'm sure they would be delicious too. So, all right, here's my ginger. So the recipe calls for 1 inch of fresh ginger. This is more than 1 inch, but I find that once I'm peeling off the skin of it, it kind of takes away some of the circumference, if you will. So I'm going to go a little bit more than 1 inch. I probably have about 2 inches here, but that's going to be a-okay because ginger is really good for you. And then the turmeric in here too is such healing, powerful foods, along with the garlic, that you cannot go wrong by adding them into your diet. Like I said, the medical medium has another broth too that has mushroom in it, and I do like that one too. That one's also on our channel, but I'd really just prefer this one because it's like less distinctive in terms of, I think the mushroom one, although very good, it doesn't pair as well with the many different recipes that I like to make. And this one is so versatile, it can go into pretty much any savory dish. So this is why this one is my favorite. So this ginger, I'm just cutting it into small pieces, kind of mincing it, I think. Yeah, I'll mince it. Then I'm going to throw it into my pot. And then I'm going to move on to the turmeric. And when you're working with turmeric, be careful to not get it onto your clothes because it does like to stain. It'll even stain your fingers just a little bit, but that means it's very saturated in its colors. And so if it's that saturated, then it's going to really saturate your cells in a really good way too. But so just chopping up the ginger, and then I'm going to throw this into my pot. And now I'm going to add in my turmeric. Love turmeric so much. You can make like a turmeric and ginger tea if you're feeling down and you need some goodness in your system. Just add this with some hot water, maybe a little bit of honey. And yeah, try to get in your ginger and turmeric and garlic into your diet. It's just more of a specific flavor, so you don't want to put turmeric in everything, but I do love it. So there's my turmeric. Chopping this up. You can see that this recipe is pretty easy and it doesn't take too much time. It's just a little bit of chopping. But once that's done and I turn it onto the stove, you can just let it be and let it do its thing, walk away, just come back to it periodically, stir it, and I'll show you what it looks like, the colors when I'm done here prepping. But I have 2 yellow onions. Just gonna peel these off. I'm just gonna chop these up, and I'm not trying to make anything look perfect. I'm just preparing them because it's gonna cook down. So I've got my 2 onions, and let me chop that one. And then I've just got my garlic left over, and I'm just gonna stick whole garlic cloves into the broth. And yeah, that's that. Find this on our YouTube channel. Highly recommend making it. So good for you. The onions are gonna make my eyes water, but I'm just chopping these up coarsely because it's not going into a dish where you're gonna eat big chunks of onion. And even if when I do turn this into another soup and blend it down, it's gonna be all blended. So I don't have to spend a ton of time meticulously chopping. I'm just preparing it to cook down. One more onion. And then I've got my garlic, and it's 6 garlic cloves, but like I said, I'm gonna go a little bit heavier on the garlic. I'm gonna throw the whole cloves in there, add my water, and it'll be good to go. And I'm gonna use this in a potato leek soup that I'm making this week. So I'm using it in that. I'm using it in different soups that I'm trying out. Another pumpkin soup that I'm working on, because it just provides a nice depth to anything that calls for broth or water in a recipe. And even just sauteing in the broth versus oil, it really brings a nice flavor and smell to your kitchen. Now my eyes are watering. I've got my garlic cloves. I'm just gonna cut the ends off. These are kind of little, so I'm gonna add in extra. And then I'm just going to chop off the ends. Excuse me, the onions are just getting to me. Peeling back, and then just tossing the whole garlic in there. So pretty simple. Oh, I don't know if it's a total phenomenon for everyone for their eyes to water with onions, but wowee. Okay, so yeah, I'm probably gonna use about this whole clove, well, what do you call this? A whole bulb of garlic, and then some in here, because it's not going to be overpowering or anything like that. All the flavors in here are really subtle. It's a nice subtle broth. It's not, you're not going to taste one thing predominantly or anything like that. It just cooks up really well, blends really well. The combination of ingredients is so good. Excuse me. And yeah, I just love it. I love it so much. And you can find this on our channel. I just wanted to kind of do this live just because I'm making it, and I think sometimes it's just nice to have a refresher on something and see how easy it is, you know, to take a little bit of time out of your day, each day, get your hands in the food and take in more of the fresh herbs, vegetables, organic, leafy greens, things like that, and watch you experience some changes in your health and your diet, and really considering the troublemaker foods. We've talked about them quite a bit on our See You Next Thursdays. Excuse me, my eyes are just watering. And the troublemaker foods, they're really fascinating to learn about, where all the medical medium foods are about promoting health. And he says lifetime versus, this isn't a diet. It's not a quick fix. This is a lifetime of changes to really support your health. And you can do it with taking in really beautiful healing foods. So that's what is so incredible about the medical medium information. And it's been so transformative for us and for my health and the way that I look at food and the way that I cook. And my whole approach has really changed from years ago eating high fat raw to then going vegan and still eating a lot of fat. And our perceptions on fat in recent years, I would say the last 8 years, has been really changing. 8 to 10 years. We've been really 10 years since we first got the medical medium books, and we've really changed our whole approach to eating. Still love our fat, but not eating as much fat as I definitely used to eat as much. I used to eat so much more. So I'm doing about a bulb and a half of garlic just because they're small. And then my broth is good to go. So let me just pull these last few pieces off and show you what it looks like. I'm gonna add some water to this and get it cooking. I'm gonna turn it up to high, let it boil, and then turn it down to simmer. Let it cook for about 2 hours, and then, excuse me, the onions, they're making my eyes water and everything. That's why I'm sniffing. So, yeah. Just putting these in here, and then peel that off. Sticking the whole bulb in. And then I'm good to go. Oh, that's not good. So let me get this out of the way. And show you my pot. All of my veggies in there. Really beautiful ingredients. So I'm gonna do about 16 cups of filtered water. We use reverse osmosis water that we get in these BPA-free jugs from the health food store. I'm adding in 16 cups. So this is reverse osmosis. We then remineralize our water with some trace minerals. So this is 3 gallons right here. I'm going to show you what we do to remineralize our water, because when you get the reverse osmosis, it's stripping the water of all the bad stuff and the good stuff. So we're going to remineralize it. So if this is 3 gallons, let me add in my water. Then we get this brand here from the wellness department. You can order it online too. It's called Trace Minerals by a company called Concentrace, Trace Mineral Drops. And they last for a long time. 3 gallons, we do 120 drops of trace minerals to remineralize our water. And we keep one of these mineralized, and then I have another jug down below that we don't add the minerals to, that we cook with. So I used one that did not have minerals because I'm cooking with it. I mean, I could have had the minerals if I wanted to, but I'm just using straight up reverse osmosis water. And then there's my Liver Rescue Broth. Like I said, you can eat this as a soup entirely with everything in it. Enjoy it that way. What I do is I'm going to turn this on to high, put it on the stovetop. I'm going to bring it to a boil, let it boil, and then I will turn it down to a low heat, let it simmer, stirring periodically. Once it's down to a simmer, I'm going to let it cook for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to strain it off with a fine mesh strainer, save the insides, and put them in the refrigerator. If I don't use them within the next week, I'll freeze them, pull them out, and then reblend the ingredients that's in the soup into another soup. But the broth, meanwhile, I'll put into glass jars, keep it in my refrigerator, and use it for a series of ways, my favorite being in soups. I love to saute in the broth, and anything that calls for water in a savory recipe, I will use the Liver Rescue Broth in lieu of that. So yeah, I would highly recommend giving it a try. Check it out on our YouTube channel. It's called the Liver Rescue Broth, medical medium. And we have the other one on there too. That's the healing broth that has the mushroom base. This one's my favorite though. Winter squash, cilantro, turmeric, ginger, garlic, carrot, celery. Did I say everything? Filtered water. I think that's it. Yeah. Super beautiful. Feels so good in my body. Definitely helps with inflammation, helps to hydrate the liver, and brings a lot of flavor to your meal. So get you some, and hope you enjoy. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. Yep.